Good afternoon, everyone. This is Bill Even, your CEO at the Pork Checkoff in Des Moines, Iowa. Thanks for joining our Tuesday webinar on COVID-19 tools for managing the current situation. We know that the backup of hogs in the countryside continues to increase. We're north of 1.5 million hogs that normally should have been gone through the plants by now that have not. We look at the ground zero of where a lot of this is happening. It's certainly hitting in the upper Midwest, particularly Minnesota, northern Iowa, South Dakota, and Nebraska. We do anticipate this to continue to spread, and the reason we're having this call is to make sure that producers, veterinarians, allied industry, and others are fully aware of what's occurring, and then how to best be positioned and prepared for what's headed their way. So on the next slide, you'll see our standard antitrust statement is the National Pork Board does assign the high priority to following the antitrust laws here in the United States. And on the next slide, I want to make sure we cover off that the reason we're putting this information is out here publicly. It will be saved to our website, and you'll be able to have this recording to share with others. And the views expressed by our speakers are theirs and not those of the National Pork Board, which does not necessarily advocate, endorse, or suggest any course of conduct or action that may be covered today. On the next slide is our contact information. All of the resources the Pork Board has available, including many from the USDA and others, are located at pork.org/COVID-19. Our 1-800 number here is available and can be, just give us a call if you've got questions or issues. And then you can also send us an email at info@pork.org and we'll get back to you with an answer. So on the next slide, we'll go through the speakers we have today. We are pleased to have with us Dr. Brad Leuwerke, veterinarian with the Swine Vet Center, as well as Dr. Jake Schwartz, a veterinarian with the Swine Vet Center. We're going to talk about some of the practical things you need to be concerned with on emergency day population. And then we're going to close with Mr. Ted Matthews, the director of the Minnesota Rural Health. Ted's going to give us some just kind of an overview of things we need to keep about top of mind as we're working with our friends and neighbors in this very difficult situation. So on the next slide, we've got our agenda. I'm going to give a couple of slides on the supply chain operations and where we're seeing packing capacity at. And then we're going to roll into the comments and conversations from our two veterinarians and Ted. So on the next slide, if you're interested in knowing the status of the U.S. pork packing industry, the Pork Board has this map. It's pork.to/map. It is an interactive map that you can look at by company or by location, and it shows in green which plants are running at capacity, in yellow which ones are running at partial capacity, in red the plants that are currently idle and not operating at all. Feel free to share this information far and wide with anyone else. In addition, we also internally have a pretty good running list of the total capacity and percent operations in the U.S. pork industry on a daily basis, thanks to some good work by Dr. Steve Meyer at Kearns & Associates, as well as Len Steiner with Steiner Research. On the next slide, we want to share the resources for producers. Many of you are perhaps considering or in the middle of having to deal with emergency depopulation and disposal. The Pork Board has put together this checklist, essentially a record-keeping document that we're encouraging every producer to download and use. You can find this on the pork.org/COVID-19 page. Just click on View Resources, and we have a number of sheets and printouts available there. I had the opportunity to speak with USDA Undersecretary Greg Ibaugh here, it's probably been 2 weeks ago, and he really asked us to ensure that producers out there need to be aware that you need to keep track of what's happening on your farm. And while it's not clear what any indemnity may or may not be paid, having records, particularly things that have been verified by your veterinarian or a third party, will be helpful. In addition, many of you are aware that the USDA NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, does have a program through EQIP that can help producers with disposal. But that also requires you as a producer to contact your county NRCS office and fill out some paperwork, or at least have a phone conversation where they can gather your information before you have to take action for emergency euthanasia. So I would encourage all the producers out there, share this document as well. It's unfortunate that we're going to have to fill this out, but at least then you have some records that you can use later for your operation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jake, who's going to talk on the next slide about emergency depopulation. Jake and Brad, thanks for your help.
Thanks, Bill. Good afternoon. Like Bill said, my name is Jake Schwartz, along with Brad Leuwerke from Swine Vet Center. We'll both be sharing some thoughts here this afternoon, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to do so. Next slide. So emergency depopulation, obviously not an easy topic to cover. Before we get into it, I think it is worth noting for some on the call here, producers have done a tremendous amount of work in the past weeks to try to do everything in their power to slow down growth from a nutrition or environment standpoint to prevent having to do depop. But nonetheless, it is a reality that many are faced with today, and it is important to talk about, even though it can be uncomfortable. And so the goal for Brad and I here this afternoon is to provide a little bit of practical thoughts and maybe some observations from the field in this process. Next slide. So methods of depopulation, the American Association of Swine Veterinarians, as well as the American Veterinary Medical Association, have provided guidelines or accepted options for mass depopulation. The main takeaway from this slide being is that there are preferred methods, which would be the column on the far left, as well as methods that would be permitted in constrained circumstances. And we have had clear direction from state animal health officials that the scenario we are in today would be considered a constrained circumstance, opening up those methods of depopulation as accepted or permitted at this time. Next slide. So methods of depopulation, you have your preferred methods, many of which are currently or can be done regularly on a small scale. And from a veterinary standpoint and from a personnel safety standpoint, you feel good that can be executed again on a small scale. For constrained circumstances, we have two main options, one being ventilation shutdown, and as well as the use of sodium nitrite. I think it's a good opportunity on this call here to say that a lot of research is being done on these two topics right now, and there certainly has been a lot of collaboration in the industry as well as within the swine veterinary community. And so if you're a producer or a veterinarian who finds yourself in the beginning of this process, please feel free to reach out to others and learn from others who may be further along this process, both to learn from them, but potentially avoid making mistakes that may have already been made. Next slide. So AVMA considerations for depopulation. So with this list here, a veterinarian should consider when walking through this process with a farmer or with a client. And those would be the personal safety, the animal welfare, stage of production, number of animals to depopulate. That will change the practicality of a particular method of depopulation drastically, obviously, and then facility type. And so it's the vet's role to interpret all of these considerations and then together with the producer, implement the most humane method given those circumstances. And I think it is worth emphasizing, it's my interpretation that the American Veterinary Medical Association has written these guidelines and intentionally left a level of grayscale for veterinary interpretation, given the circumstances. And these circumstances certainly will vary by farmer, right? So, the number of animals being a big one, facility type being another. And these are not easy decisions for anyone. But I really want farmers to know that in this scenario, it's the herd veterinarian's responsibility to assure the producer that they, the veterinarian, played an active role in the decision-making process and in interpreting, that gray scale. And so the bottom line is it's not to be shouldered by the producer alone in this decision-making process. And, I think that's how the AVMA guidelines intended for this, how the AVMA guidelines intended for this process to work. And, in the end, the veterinarian suggests the most humane manner of depopulation within the guidelines set forth by the AVMA. And it's my hope that farmers can find a little comfort in that fact as they make these hard decisions moving forward. Take the next slide, and Brad, you can take it from there.
Okay, thanks, Jake. So once the method of depopulation or euthanasia has been selected, I think the next critical part is determining the labor needs on the site for the actual depopulation to occur. And I wish I had a metric for the number of people that it takes to do this, but each producer, each site is going to be a little bit different on that need. And really, it's what we've seen. It's a balancing. Initially, we wanted to minimize the labor involved, so minimize the traffic into the site where we're doing a site depopulation. But the reality is, many of you on the phone would know, is this is a hard job. It's both mentally and physically fatiguing, and so we need to make sure that you've got enough people in place so that if you need to switch out people for that active depopulation of the site, that you have those people available to do that. I would say that in planning for the depopulation, also avoid really drastic labor needs. I'm reminded of one of the first site depopulations I took part in. Our goal was to euthanize pigs within the pen in the barn so that we could keep everything inside, but the reality of that was the labor necessary to move those euthanized pigs out of the barn for disposal was tremendous. And so think through ways that you can get those pigs close to an exit of the barn before euthanizing, or preferably outside of the barn before that euthanasia takes place, if that is possible. I would say that we're seeing some now that are creating or designing a central location where they're taking pigs to that site, usually a site that has the ability where we can move heavier equipment, i.e. skid loaders or something, to pick up those euthanized pigs, so that we aren't putting that all on people to drag or cart those euthanized market weight pigs out of the site. Next slide. I think the other important part before any euthanasia of pigs takes place is preparing that team that's going to be involved in the depopulation, really discussing the whys of the why that the site is being depopulated. Inherently, the depopulations that Jake and I have been involved in, you get questions throughout the entire process of why we're doing this and why we've come to this point of depopulating the site. And so if we can preempt that with a discussion before the depopulation starts, I think that's helpful. And no doubt those involved, myself included, get questions from friends, family, neighbors after the depopulation is done. And so being able to talk through those, why we're at this point, I think is important. When picking those individuals that are going to be involved with depopulating a site, I think it's important that a bulk of them, if not all of them, be PQA certified. I think that's important from a understanding, number one, how to euthanize pigs, how to handle or use euthanasia equipment, and then certainly from an animal welfare standpoint, being able to confirm that euthanasia of each individual animal has been successful are all important parts to consider in prepping for a site depopulation. Next slide. And it really should go without saying, but safety first has got to be the goal as we start a site depop. Jake listed out the methods, both preferred and in constrained situations, to euthanize pigs, and a few of those methods do carry some human safety risks, especially when I think about it when you have large numbers of pigs, so repetitive motion, whether that be a gunshot, bolt gun, electrocution. Whenever we add repetition, we add the risk of human injury. And so been really impressed and proud of clients that we've played a role with here in the last couple of weeks with us, where they take the human safety part first and foremost and practice patience while they're depopulating the site. I think it's also important to have someone in charge, or maybe multiple people in charge of at the site itself. Number one, confirming successful euthanasia. We want to have this as a humane process as possible, and so confirming that we're successful in getting pigs euthanized. Someone that's monitoring for fatigue. People will get tired. People will get stressed out during the day or multiple days where this is taking place, and so when we can recognize that and switch people out, I think it's beneficial for everyone. And then monitoring safe procedures as we get tired, as technique on euthanasia gets, I'll say it's sloppy. We want to make sure that we're recognizing that too and switching someone else in so that we're keeping human safety in mind at all times. Next slide. And as Bill mentioned early in this talk on record keeping, I think it's important to work with your herd veterinarian to develop a standard set of records, and the pork board resources that were shown there in the first couple of slides is a great start on that. But we want to make sure you get the date, the number of pigs, the herd veterinarian that's involved with the decision-making process on the site euthanasia, all as part of a herd or depopulation record that you can hold on to for future use if needed. Next slide. And just to wrap up, and understand this has only been going on for maybe 10 days to 2 weeks, and so we're still in the infancy of this. So we likely don't completely understand the mental toll this is taking on those involved in the depopulation of sites. I would say that what I've seen is that the days following, it's really good when the leaders within a company or within a producer group can follow up with all of those that are involved in the depopulation of a site and just check out how's everyone doing, what questions are they getting that they may not be able to answer, and is everyone, I'll say, dealing with what the site depopulation as best as they can. And I'll turn it over to Ted.
Okay. First of all, with all of these things going on, one of the things that people always need to recognize is we're all different. So how much we can handle, how much we can't handle, that's an individual thing. So when we're looking at those things, we need to focus, for one, on how much can I take and how do I bring down my stress levels so I don't reach that peak. Nobody knows how bad it's going to get. And the way we do those things is to rely a lot on family and close friends. Talk about what's going on. Talk about what's going on with you. Bringing down that stress, just talking about it will be helpful. I get calls from everywhere in the country, literally, and all of them are focused on how can they handle all the stress that they're under. And there is no easy way. In the first place, this isn't a job for psychologists to fix everyone. This is a job for communities. Psychologists obviously play a role, but everyone in the community plays a role, and everyone in the farm community plays a role. We need to look at this as we're in this together, and that means our clergy, our friends, our spouses. When we're under this kind of stress, the tendency is for us to get angry. You know, we're angry at ourselves, we're angry at the situation, we're angry at people who aren't doing what we think they should be doing, or they're not doing it quickly enough. And all of those things, when we turn to anger, I like to tell people, drop your IQ 50 points when you're angry. Not many of us are that smart. So we tend to say things that we don't mean when we're angry, and we might only feel those things for a few seconds, but whoever we say them to will remember them forever. So understand that keeping your anger under control is important. And the first thing about that you need to remember is anger by itself does not exist. There's no such thing. So what emotion is triggering that anger? Is it stress? Is it feeling pain, emotional pain? What is it? Jealousy? Lots of soft emotions create anger. So by identifying that, I can talk that through. Another thing is oftentimes on farms, the two people that talk the most together are men and women. And this may shock all of you, but we don't think or talk alike. So because of that, we need to remember that and understanding that in general, men, the higher their stress levels, the more they pull back, the less comfortable they are with the conversation. And for women, the higher the stress level, the more they need to talk it through. Now, if I know that, that's going to be very helpful for me to simply be able to say, okay, this is your natural place to be. If I'm the wife, to say, I know that this is really difficult for you to talk about, but I need to talk about those things, and to have you hear that that is how you're feeling, and for her to know the same thing. So when you're looking at these things, know the differences, just the simple basic differences, and that will help you keep your anger under control. Because if we don't know that, then the frustration level can easily set in. How come you always want to talk about this? I'm feeling enough stress, I don't want to talk about this. And for her to say, why don't you ever talk to me? That can create all kinds of problems simply because we communicate differently. So understand that that difference is important to identify if we're going to get through some of these things. The farms that I've talked to with needing to slaughter their pigs and so on, that stress level is scary high. And we need to find ways to lower it, but we tend to not like that concept of lowering. We want things fixed. We want A, it's good, B, it's bad. And in reality with this, it's bad and we can make it a little bit better. And that's the best we can do. But making it a little bit better beats the heck out of not making it a little bit better, because as I said earlier, as our stress level gets higher, we don't know how much we can handle. So anything we can do to lower it some is helpful. And communicating is probably one of the most important things. Communicating with anyone. Understand that as you're talking through these things, your family, and family is, according to every farmer I've ever talked to, the most important thing in their life. So prove it by making that family a part of your discussions as to what's going on with you, rather than think you're saving them from that. You're actually doing just the opposite. Every person in your family will know that you're going through all of those things, and most of them will truly want to help you, but they can't help you if they don't know what it is that you're talking about. And so make sure you identify the family as a truly important part, and your spouse as the person to lean on, because you lean on them, they'll lean on you, and together you can do a whole lot better. Also, I want to talk about something that's really difficult, which is suicide. As probably a lot of you know, the suicide level in farming is incredibly high. Some say it's number one, some two, some three. But in my opinion, it's probably number one, because there's a lot of suicides that aren't identified because they're identified as farm accidents. And I know that because I've worked with farmers that attempted suicide and tried to make it look like an accident because they felt like they were better off financially they were better off dead than alive. We all need to remember that nobody in your family would be better off if you're not there. And we create that kind of thinking by pulling back further and further and not talking. So understand that our emotions are really, really fragile right now. And what we can do to make that better is focus on what I can do. Even the little things will help. When you're communicating and I've had a lot of wives call me and say, you know, my husband really needs to talk to you, but he won't call. And, you know, the truth is, I don't think I've ever met a farmer that said, you know, give me a minute, I need to call my psychologist. So that's not going to happen. But calling Ted and just saying, well, Ted knows more about this than I do, why don't we give him a call and see what he has to say, or calling yourself and talking about it and conveying the messages that I give, as opposed to nothing. And that's truly an important factor. It's better than nothing. It is not perfect. It is not even great. It is not even good. It's better than nothing. Use the hotlines. They will direct you. Understand that the clergy is there to help you. And if you're a religious person and you feel that need, make sure that you understand that they are not there to help you when things are good. They are there to help you when things aren't. So use the resources that you have. When I look at suicides, the number one group that I look to for help immediately is the sheriff's offices. And the reason I look at the sheriff's offices is they're trained, they know what they need to do, they will go out to the farm, they will assess the situation, and if that person needs to go in for counseling or just for safety's sake, they'll take them into the emergency room at their local hospital and they'll go from there. And that is just an incredibly important person to look at. Some other people that are really helpful, the veterinarians, farm business management, extension, social services. In Minnesota, we have farm advocates and farm mediators, and they are really, really helpful as far as looking at your books and seeing what you can do in front of you. So looking at all of those stressful situations and what you can do, you need to make sure that you don't say, well, better not call, I know how busy they are. Let the person who you're calling, if somebody calls me, I don't think I've ever told somebody I was too busy to talk to them. If you call, expect something in return. And if you don't get it, ask what's going on. Well, what do I need to do? Next, be nice to yourself. When things go bad, we tend to blame ourselves oftentimes. And when we blame ourselves, we go back into this rut of people are better off without me. The world is better off without me. If I may lose my farm, what am I going to do? People will look at that and reflect that as part of my personality or my shortcomings. And those things aren't true. And I need to learn that those things aren't true. For one thing, hopefully no farmer ever has to lose their farm, but if they do, there is life after farming and people can help them get from point A to point B. So that is there, but they have to be able to reach out. Also remember that when we look at our stress, anxiety, and depression, if you want to learn about that, read a book. But if you want to know about your own, listen to yourself and ask people that are closest to you what that is. Where is my stress, anxiety, and depression? How deep is that? Remember, if stress, anxiety, and depression was so easy to identify, there wouldn't be 100,000 books written on every single one of those subjects. So understand that it's really difficult to look at those things. And I need to focus on where I am with those things so I can take care of myself better and take care of people closest to me better. I'm not sure exactly how to stress the importance of communication without anger. But when we have anger, we get nothing accomplished. And we do oftentimes get bad things to happen. And we have problems with alcohol and drug abuse. A lot of people have called me and said, I know my husband's drinking a lot because I found 10 bottles in the barn. That's a way of coping, but it's not a good way of coping. So again, working together to find those things that will be helpful becomes really important. I'm not sure if there's any options for questions. Does anyone have any questions on that so far, or is that not part of what you'd like me to do?
We would ask that folks would put questions into the chat feature on the GoToMeeting site, and we will address those individually and follow up with everyone afterwards, but not live on here. So if you have questions, please put it into the chat function. We'll capture those and answer them directly afterwards.
Okay, how much time do I have?
You've got a few more minutes if you need it, Ted.
Okay. I also want to talk about personality differences. Introverts and extroverts, and probably everybody that's listening right now knows the difference between the two, but what they don't understand oftentimes is how that can affect relationships. I worked with more than one farm family over the years that one was truly an extrovert, the other truly an introvert, and they were having huge marital problems because they assessed, as an introvert, you assess an extrovert who doesn't want to be home because they're involved in all kinds of other activities as, if you love me, why wouldn't you be home? Why wouldn't you stay with me? Why wouldn't you be a part of my life? And for the extrovert, they're thinking, maybe I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus. I do all these good things. I'm on the church council. I'm doing things for the school. I'm doing things to support. And so they look at each other and don't understand why they feel the way they do. And by breaking that down to understand that the difference in personality is the issue, and then they can find ways to come together in a relationship, by deciding how many days a night or nights one of the people can be gone, and what you can do then with the family on the nights that you're not, and support each other on both sides of that equation. That can become really important also. I also want to talk about the fact that people, when they hear mental health, they think mental illness. And that is a crucial problem in our society, because if we hear mental illness, we think, I'm not crazy, there's nothing wrong with me, and so they don't do anything. The fact is, mental health, everyone should want to be healthier. Everyone should want to be mentally healthier. The happiest person alive should want to be happier still. So understand that mental health is just that, feeling better about yourself and your situation than you do. That's what mental health is. And so if you focus on it that way, you're not looking at it like, I'm not crazy, there's nothing wrong with me. Mental health doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It means that if you have stress, anxiety, depression, there's things that you can do to make yourself happier, healthier, better. And when we look at it in a physical sense, it's pretty easy. If I cut my arm wide open, I don't look around and ask people what they think. I go to the doctor and get my arm fixed. If emotionally I'm hurt, I should be the one that's the expert on being hurt and look at what I'm going to do and focus on that. Be nice to yourself. Remember, oftentimes we are our own worst enemy. We focus on what's wrong with us, what we could have done, what we should have done, instead of what we have done and what we are doing. Be nice to ourselves. The hardest thing in the world to do is to be nice to ourselves, and the easiest thing is to look at other people and really focus on helping them. So how I do that is give myself a break. Look at my faults as part of my being and let people help support me in those things and help me get through that. Strong family values only exist if we let them in. If we don't let them in, it doesn't matter how strong our family values are. We have to be a part of that family. And oftentimes the male in the family will pull back to the point where they aren't really a part of that family. They need to be. And if you want to be the head of a household, if you want to be a strong part of that household, then you need to share right along with everyone else in that household, or it just doesn't work. One of the problems too with mental health issues is forever women worked off the farm, or women worked on the farm, and they raised little farmers. That was their job for 5,000 years. It's not anymore. Now the difference is they work off the farms, they do the books. If they do the books, they have this thing that they didn't have before called an opinion. And that opinion can be different than the male farmer. So how you work those things through is difficult because oftentimes your ancestors didn't do it that way. So it's much harder. Divorces on farms are now as high on a farm as they are off farms. And the reason for that is when women work off the farm, they're working oftentimes for the wrong reasons. They're working to pay the insurance, they're working to pay down the debt on the farm, and those are really difficult things to have to go to work. I would much rather, as a farmer, work 12 hours a day on my farm doing exactly what I want to do than working 8 hours a day in town at something I hated. So when women come home, they need to be supported too. It's a two-way street, and it needs to be looked at that way. With the coronavirus and with everything that's going on with that, there are no easy answers. There are no easy solutions. And I unfortunately see people talking about the meat packing plants. They talk about how much money is being lost. They talk about concerns about whether there'll be pork in the future or enough pork in the future. And I just don't see too many people in the media talking about the farmers and what it is like for them to kill their pigs, to do that and know that there is a need out there for those, but the system or the disease is creating all of those things, and the support system for the hog farmers is just not there. I sympathize with you. I empathize with you. I wish there were more things that were being done. When I watch the news, I hear about all the money that's being lost from all the big players, but I don't hear too much about the farmers that are having to go through this incredibly tragic event. And again, as I was talking about earlier, family becomes so important. And that's the one thing that you can hold on to, and that's the one thing that you need to hold on to. If you need to call me, my phone number is 320-266-2390. And I would be glad to talk with you. If you need to talk to me about someone else, that's better than not calling at all. So don't hesitate to do that either. we're all in this together, and that means I have to do my end, and for you, you have to survive this so you can go another day. And remember, there is things in front of us that will be helpful, and we just have to survive this time to get down to the next time, to get down to the next period in our life. So for now, I guess that's about what I have to say.
Ted, very much appreciate your input here. And for everyone on the call, again, if you have any specific questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. This webinar will also be recorded and be put at the website porc.org/COVID-19. If you have any questions or would like to get a hold of Ted, feel free to call the 1-800-456-7675. Otherwise, we will publish the number that he gave when we publish this on the website. As always, we thank you for your time, and if there's ever anything we can do for you, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you all and have a great day.